Hey, I am Wright, who is out of Orlando and a fellow Florida death row exoneree. I'll let him explain the story. It's today's topic. We are going to talk about a little bit about Ryan's case and why it's so difficult for people that's been exonerated in the state of Florida to get compensated, and what's going on with that, the bills and the measures that's being taken. So with that being said, Ron, can you give me a little bit of give the viewers a little bit about yourself?
And my background, I'm a former law enforcement officer and military veteran. That's what I've been doing since high school. And I've also gotten into commercial transportation as a truck driver. As you know, back in, I think it was 2013, I was convicted of capital murder, 2 murders that I did not commit, was sentenced to death. And
As my background, I'm a former law enforcement officer and military veteran. That's what I've been doing.
Somebody else hearing that feedback?
Yeah, that was me. I was adding you to a watch party. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. 8.5 years I spent incarcerated before my case going before the Florida Supreme Court on direct review, and they unanimously voted to reverse the judgment of conviction, vacate the sentences, and remanded it back to trial court with instructions to enter judgments of acquittal. And I went home July of 2017, and I've just been on the road working with Florida Floridians for alternatives to the death penalty, witness to innocence, and doing my job in transportation.
May I ask, how long was you on actual death row?
About 3.5 years total on death row itself, but it was 8.5 years from the date of arrest to the date I was released.
You know, you are one of the oddest the oddest cases, and here it is. We're dealing with a great deal of police brutality and prosecuting police officers for the abuse that they're doing. But here it is, they have a ex-police officer that actually was arrested and charged with murder for something he did not do. How do you feel about that?
Well, obviously, it turns my stomach to think that all the effort and time put into investigating a case could result in going after the wrong person and potentially having the wrong person executed for something. But it was different because it wasn't the police who actually went after me. It was the state attorney's office. The state attorney investigator himself took the stand during trial and testified that they received the case 11 months later as an unresolved homicide. But in Florida, all felonies have to be reported to the state attorney's office, and then they pick it up and run with it and make decisions on whether or not to charge somebody or to prosecute someone and just how they plan on closing the case out. So it was actually the state attorney's office that decided to come after me and prosecute me for this.
And you know, I kind of wonder. You know, I don't play racism on this. I don't believe in racism, but you know, it's a lot of times where we have white officers actually doing abuse to black individuals, and it's fine that the prosecutors don't even try to seek any charges and everything. Do you think because you was a black officer that the state attorney coming after you was not even a big decision for them?
I think it probably did play a role, although I cannot, prove that. But one thing I do know is that I don't think race played a whole lot into my case in determining whether or not I was guilty or innocent for the jury. Because, as you know, it was a wholly circumstantial case, so it wasn't about any evidence that said I committed the crime. It was about the story the prosecutors wanted to tell them. You know, they wrote the narrative, they decided what the story would be, and they decided, it's their story, they can tell it the way they want to. And that's exactly what they did. And everything else, including the truth, be damned, you know.
So, let's go to this. Both of us was exonerated in Florida. I'm actually the 23rd. I think you what, the 25th or the 26th?
I'm 27th.
27. And we have this statute of 961 that is supposed to allow people that's been exonerated in the state of Florida to be compensated for the wrongful conviction that was imposed on them. But for me, I wasn't able to apply for it because I had a past prior, which they had the Clean Hands Act in the bill, where if you had a prior conviction, even though it's not related, it will actually prohibit you from getting the compensation. We removed that from the bill, but from my understanding, you went through the process to get compensated, and you had to face some real challenges, and you still didn't get the compensation. Can you tell us about a little bit about that process with you?
Yeah, sure. The problem is the way the statute is written, specifically with the verbiage or the language that they included in it. Like in your case, it included the clean hands provision, which I think is a legislature issue that needs to be corrected. Because like one of the state legislators mentioned, we require others to have clean hands, but then the state doesn't have clean hands. And the fact that you are denied compensation because of something unrelated to your being wrongfully convicted and incarcerated is no excuse to not compensate you for their mistake. In my case, the statute actually requires that the petitioner, being me, produce evidence of what is called actual innocence. In other words, I'm putting myself all the way, back on trial all over again, and I have to come up with evidence that shows I was actually innocent. Well, the problem with that is the burden is actually on the state to have the evidence to prove you're actually guilty. And it completely overlooks and disregards the fact that there is no evidence of guilt and that someone should never have been accused, arrested, and charged or prosecuted, much less convicted and sentenced to death for something they didn't do. So with that language being written into the statute like that, and you have to remember, this was a statute written years ago for one specific case where I think a man spent like 30 years in prison, and at the time DNA testing was not possible, yet later it became possible. Well, they did the DNA testing and found out it wasn't his DNA, and he was ultimately released. Well, then this statute came along so that he could be compensated under, by the Florida law for his wrongful incarceration. The problem is in his case where DNA comes along later and can help exonerate him, not all cases fit into that particular vein. There will be other cases where there are other cases where there's simply a matter of prosecutorial misconduct, where they misrepresent evidence, don't tell the jury the truth, much less the whole truth, and in turn, you now have the burden under this statute of actually proving yourself innocent when they should have never attempted to prove you guilty when they knew from the beginning there was no evidence of guilt whatsoever. So that's why I was denied compensation, because I couldn't produce evidence of actual innocence, although a lot of the state's evidence actually helped to exonerate me because it was their own evidence that, proved my innocence, despite the way they twisted it and turned it around and misrepresented it to a jury.
And that's the most difficult thing, because here it is, and those that's joining us right now on Facebook Live, Crew Justice Weekly Conversation, I want to thank you for joining in. This is Ryan Wright, Florida's 27th death row exoneree. We're talking about the compensation. Ryan, it's crazy how, basically the state can take a person and actually put that person in incarceration, wrongfully convict them. And then when they found out this is not the person. They take them through even more trial and tribulation to try to prove that he or she is actually innocent before they compensate that person. Even though, like in my case, it was a 7-0 vote from the highest court in the state of Florida, Florida Supreme Court. I mean, if the Florida Supreme Court ruled that a judgment acquittal should have been there, that should be significant enough to say that is that person was wrongfully convicted. Now to turn around and make me or people such as yourself, other exonerees, go back to court and we have to prove that we was actually innocent, that is like crazy. When the state cannot accept responsibility of what the victims that they are actually creating. So my question to you on that, what steps have you? I know a senator. I was representing the Bose and introduced the bill before. I forgot the senator name that introduced Bradley. Senator Bradley introduced it before. So now last year we finally got the Clean Hands Act out of that. But it was just like you said. Florida don't have clean hands, so how should we hold them accountable? But now to take a person and make them prove that they're innocent, for you to compensate to them what they have done, and you have not even received the apology. How did that make you feel? I mean, we're talking about the trauma now.
Well, it's really disconcerting and disheartening because these are the members of the legislature that we trust to make laws that are fair and just and that can be applied equally to everyone. What we have happening here, people don't understand, as it is written, it triggers what's called the adversarial process, because when you file that petition, it must be filed with the original sentencing court. Now, this is a judge who's already adjudicated you guilty. Now he's had to turn around and reverse that because he was ordered to adjudicate you not guilty. Now he's required to make a determination that you are, in fact, what the statute calls a victim of wrongful incarceration. So we're kind of doing a little, tennis game here where the ball goes back and forth with this court. But when it triggers that adversarial process, this is where somebody comes in to fight against you, and that's the Assistant Attorney General's office or the local prosecutor's office all over again. It's like when you file that petition with the trial court, that tells the prosecutors or the Assistant Attorney General to come in and fight you to basically stick to their story. And like you said, they won't accept responsibility. They will not admit they're wrong, unlike the case we just heard of here in Florida recently over in Tampa, where the state attorney held the press conference and actually admitted and apologized to the man for his 37 years of being wrongfully incarcerated for something they now know he was innocent of. The problem is that at the time, I can't say what went on during that trial, but if it was known that their evidence was no good and that there was any chance at all this man was innocent and he should not have been prosecuted, much less convicted and sentenced to prison or to death row, then that makes the state's hands even dirtier, because that's who those prosecutors represent, the justice system and the state. But see, while you're fighting this petition, the state doesn't have to go to jail and lose their time while you try to fight them. To go to jail and lose your time and your freedom and your family and everything else you had to try and prove your innocence in the face of the state's completely misleading, misrepresenting a court and a jury to try and claim you were guilty of something you didn't do.
Let's talk about the state attorney. The state attorney you were talking about in Tampa, his name is Andrew Warren. I've met him plenty of times. And very few prosecutors step out. Like we had Empress Alaya, pronounce her name properly, of Orlando. She stepped out against the death penalty. The governor wanted to make a big mess out of it. Then we have someone like Andrew Warren just came up, and he is actually have put together a unit to actually bring out innocent people in his district. So that tells us the state attorney has the power to address a wrongful conviction and to look in and make sure that a conviction is properly prosecuted, that justice was in it. If it was a problem, then it wouldn't have been brought to the light. So with that being said, that the prosecutor has this power, and we have to be the ones that the people of society have to be the one to actually elect these prosecutors, these state attorneys. I wonder why don't the I don't know if I'm freezing up. Do it look like I'm freezing up to you, Mark?
Yeah, it does freeze.
Yeah, I see it's freezing up. I think I'm having internet problems. No, actually, I think it was Ron having internet problems because his internet just went out. But the thing about it is that this is why it's so important that people vote for the person that is right for state attorney, the elected officials to actually that's actually seeking justice. And these prosecutors has the power for it. The sad thing about it is that I've worked with a lot of victim family members, people whose family members have been murdered, and the person that's been murdered, that did the crime is actually on death row. And I've seen them fight against the state attorney to say, no, we don't want that person to lose his life. We don't want that person to be executed. And when that happens, a lot of time the state attorneys actually still fight against what the victim family want. They actually fight against them saying, okay, let's give this person a life sentence instead of giving this person death. But yet they said in public, they try to use the death penalty as a way of justice. But here, the family member is saying, my family member who has died don't believe in the death penalty. They wouldn't want this person to be executed in their name. And the state will still try to execute that person. So, when it comes down to it, the state is basically doing what the hell they want to do. Excuse my language, but they're doing, and it's frustrating to me to talk about this and think about this, because here it is. Andrew Warren is showing a prime example of how a good state attorney is. A good state attorney is actually going out and creating units, trying to see what can make it better in their units to make sure that it's justice and it's not revenge. It's not about how many convictions I can get on my term. It's not how tough I can be on crime in my term. It's about justice. And that's why we need to take pride in the voting, those that has the rights to vote, and on the state attorneys. And Ron, since you back, now I'm gonna go back to what I was saying with you on prosecutors. Here it is, they prosecute a case. They find that it is a wrongful conviction where the Florida Supreme Court overturned the case. In your case, did you have to go back for a new trial?
No, they reversed it on direct review the first time around. A lot of people keep thinking I had a second trial and was acquitted there, but no, when they review a case, they review everything from beginning to finish. Everything that goes on in the pretrial hearings, everything that happens during the trial, all the motions, all the rulings the judge made during the trial and on those motions. And their job is to look at this and see that, one, there is evidence to support the conviction, and two, that the conviction was, gained right with supporting evidence. Well, in this case, what they found was the state had absolutely no evidence at all to bring to a jury. And then when they go back and look at how the case was presented to the jury, it was just appalling to them that they could actually arrest and prosecute somebody for something that they knew ahead of time they had nothing in hand to fight with. It was a simple matter of the story they told and the way they wanted to tell it. And let me tell you something else I've learned. There are 7 justices on the Florida Supreme Court. And recently in Tallahassee, I found out that each one of those justices has about 7 attorneys working for them that are involved in this whole review process. So on the whole, that's almost 50 people who put eyes on this case from front to back, top to bottom, beginning to end, and came up with the fact that the state was completely wrong. I mean, they actually, you know, we have the oral arguments, and then later on, there's the final judgment that comes from them, and then the conviction becomes final if it's affirmed. Well, my oral arguments were held in, I think, April of 2017. And my appellate attorney had already told my family, now, don't get excited, you know, be patient. It's going to be months and months and months before we get a ruling. And they turned around and did what they called an out-of-calendar release in the very next month. I mean, it took them less than 30 days to unanimously decide that this guy didn't do it and should never have been convicted or prosecuted for this. And I think that was very telling on the part of the fact that the Supreme Court gets to do a whole lot more than the trial court or the jury does, because as you know, during the oral arguments, your appellate attorney is there representing you. You don't go, but your attorney does, because you're still sitting in prison on death row. And then the Attorney General's office sends an assistant attorney general to argue on behalf of the state attorney's office that prosecuted you. And it was, you know, a drill situation. And that's something I discussed with my appellate attorney. Those justices, they're going to drill you guys. They're really going to get into this, and they're going to want answers. And I always encourage people to go back and watch the oral arguments, because the true justice system in action, where when there's an issue or a problem and there's something missing or something that happened that shouldn't have, or the judge made a ruling and why did he rule on that, this is where you get to get what I like to call the nuts and bolts of the case. I mean, there was a ruling made by my judge in my case about, I think it was some exculpatory evidence we wanted to introduce, and the judge ruled against it. And one of the justices asked the assistant attorney general, what was the judge's reasoning for that ruling? Why did he rule that way? And she stood there with absolutely nothing to say, because the judge gave no reasoning. He didn't write, you know, an opinion on that. He just basically denied the motion and left it at that. So when there are problems with the case, these guys don't just get into it. They get all over it, into it, on top of it, underneath it, and go through it every which way to sundown. And it's really amazing to see how that process works with them up there. But for 50 people, almost 50 people, to get into this thing and come out unanimously concluding that, no, this isn't right, that says something about what's going on in these trial courts today. Now, with Aramis Ayala, the state attorney in Orlando, my understanding is under the state constitution, it is the discretion of the state attorney to seek the death penalty or not. Now, what that means is there is no guideline or no rule that says, in this case, for this reason, the death penalty has to be the penalty. This is what you have to go for. These are decisions made by individuals. Just like when someone determines what is evidence or what is not evidence. There's no matrix, no computer program, no process to decide what these answers are. People have to make these decisions. What Aramis Ayala did was decide that she would not be seeking the death penalty for very good and valid reasons. And I felt it was wrong for the governor to try and force that on the voters in that circuit by taking those cases away from her so that somebody else could prosecute them and seek the death penalty. That to me was telling the voters, no. I'm going to do this my way and forget what your elected representative has decided to do. We don't care about that. The fact is we have the death penalty and somebody wants it used. That's really what it all comes down to. It's what I used to tell the guys on death row. That's just the bottom line. As long as we have the death penalty, there are people who want that penalty used. Just like we have prisons. People want them used to keep the bad people away from victimizing other good people. So one of the things that I like to, explain to people when I get into these things is the whole death penalty issue begins with the state attorney's office. It's not the court. It's not the family members of the victim. It's the state attorney's office who decides whether or not to seek the death penalty or not to seek the death penalty. And what I think people need to understand is how that one decision has such far-reaching consequences in terms of the way the process is going to be done, the money that's going to have to be spent, and the time that's going to be involved. Because one thing I heard my judge say repeatedly throughout the trial to keep reminding the prosecutors was, and counselor, death is different, and it's a whole different ball game once the death penalty's on the table. And that's something I give Aramis Ayala a lot of credit for not wanting to put, her people through there in Orange and Osceola County. She understood what the far-reaching implications and consequences would be, and how that was not a way of serving justice, and it does nothing to right a wrong or to protect anybody or keep us any safer.
It's amazing how Florida system is. We haven't even scratched the surface of how they abuse the juvenile justice system. And we're talking about death row exonerees. I want to thank the newest exoneree out of Pennsylvania, Walter Ogrod. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name is OGROD. And I also want to thank Obi Anthony for joining also. These programs are very important, and I hope that Walter will reach out to Witness the Innocent, and so we can get together with and have a chat and talk about your experience, because talking about the experience is very, very important to people. I was wondering.
I always tell people when I speak about this is, I was always on the outside looking in. And what I did learn about my case, I learned from my attorneys when they came to visit me while in pretrial confinement in the county jail. This was a matter where when you're on the outside looking in, you basically have no idea what's going on.
Your bandwidth went real low, so I can barely hear you. Can you hear me
All
okay?
that money for this computer. Yeah,
Okay,
I can hear you. I think it's going in and out. There must be low signal coverage in this part of the city here. But I also wanted to say that Aramis Ayala is not the only prosecutor who's taken that position on the death penalty. I'm sure you're aware of, I think his name is Larry Krasner in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, who also has an understanding of the consequences and far-reaching implications of the death penalty, and he has chosen not to seek the death penalty in that circuit either. But on the matter of these wrongful convictions and having these things being discussed and made right, I think that one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, in certain cases like the one we just had here in Florida, this was a matter of not having certain information or evidence available to them at the time that we were able to come back and discover later on. Well, in my case, it wasn't about what we did not know. It was more about what we did know and how they chose to use what they knew. Because the fact is, what they didn't know is irrelevant. I mean, I sat through 4 weeks of trial time and came away believing that this trial was not about the truth. It was actually about which side had the better story to convince 12 people. And that was all based on the way the state had to tell, not in seeking justice. They're supposed to first seek justice, but instead, it's all about when I will file a case that they want to prosecute.
And that's basically what it all boils down in the courtroom. It's like the state attorney, most people feel like the state attorney is I guess because they've been watching CSI so much, they watch Criminal Minds so much, that the jury feels like when a person is in that courtroom sitting on the other side of that seat, that person is the one, that actually committed the crime. So that the story is in the favor of the state attorney from the beginning, and then they just feel like it just feel like, the person is just getting an attorney to try to defend him, and the attorney is just saying what he can say to try to help this person out. They don't look at it as making the state hold up its end and proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Some of the people on jury duty don't even understand what it means to beyond a reasonable doubt, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And the thing about it is, what I would love to do, I would love to sit down and interview a person that's been on the jury of one of these wrongful conviction cases, and see how they feel about, and what was their reasons of feeling that that person was guilty, and getting the understanding from the jury mind of how, because in my case, we didn't have no physical evidence, no one saying I did it. It was the person that was the main witness was a person that was actually the person that they felt that committed the crime, and his word was gold. Another word, means, if the shoe was around on the other foot, and that person was testifying in a case where he was a co-defendant, and he was testifying for the defense, his word wouldn't be nothing. And it's amazing how they flip the justice system to become state attorney arena. But like I said, I'm not bashing all state attorneys, because we have some state attorneys around the United States, especially in California, New York, that's working very, very hard at trying to change how their office deal with prosecuting cases, especially the offensive cases. They taking witness statements more serious. They're taking evidence more serious. And they're weighing it out real heavily before they use it. And the thing that bothers me the most, though, is the trauma that we go through, and being placed in that position where we are actually innocent, and we're crying out, saying that, hey, we didn't do this. How we get convicted of this? We finna die from something we didn't do. That's something you will never get out your mind. Even that I've been released, I've been out 10 years now, almost 11 years. I still can't get that out of my mind, And I'm thinking about those ones that are actually inside that prison wall right now, inside on death row right now. Every time they trying to set an execution date, my mind wonder, is this a person like me that actually is innocent, And I would just love to actually sit down, and if anybody out there that's doing this know somebody who was on the jury and the case got overturned, and would be willing to do interview with me, I wish they'll contact Witness the Innocent at witnessinnocent.org and let me know, because I want the people out there to learn the most important thing about jury duty. You determine our life. Here it is, Ron, Wright, and I both got our sentences overturned on direct appeal, which is highly unusual in the state of Florida or any state. But that's being the first appeal process after trial. The Florida Supreme Court do a judgment of acquittal. That means you
Well,
don't go back.
one thing I will mention about prospective jurors is I've learned through my trial, there's always two things a member of the jury will never know. First thing is they will never know that the two prosecutors telling them this story are not telling them the truth, because they're telling them the story they want them to hear or the way they want to tell the story themselves. The second thing they will never know is whether or not those prosecutors even actually know what the truth is. Because a lot of times what we see in a circumstantial case, it's not about the evidence, it's about the way they want to tell this story and present this particular defendant to a jury so that they can compel them somehow to vote guilty instead of not guilty. And one of the things I learned in that process was how the DNA evidence, you know, we like to look at DNA as being open and shut, but there are cases where DNA is really not all that helpful. And that comes in cases where there's a mixture or a familial relationship, such as was in my case. And basically, the prosecutor's argument was, well, the DNA wouldn't have come from the child, it would have to have come from the father. And absolutely nothing whatsoever to support that. Then they find a completely different DNA profile, a full complete profile that doesn't match either of the victims, does not match me, in fact, excludes all of us, and they have not been able to identify that. So there's definitely a lot more going on in this courtroom that people need to know about and understand, so that when they sit on the jury, they can actually understand that we need to know the facts, just nothing but the facts. I don't want to hear all the dressing. Don't give me evidence and shape it, twist it, you know, rub it down, ice it, and dress it up the way you want me to see it. Let me see it for what it really, in other words, let the evidence speak for itself like it's supposed to. Anytime you have to explain evidence away and put it in a certain vein or have it viewed in a certain light, you're not telling people the truth. You're telling them what you want them to hear.
You know, I just seen a comment from Andre Ball, if I'm saying that correctly. I want to read it because this is the idea of one of the ways how things in our justice system went bad. The comment said, Herman, I think the TV crime show starting in the 70s created a false impression in the minds of people who will serve on the juries about how the criminal justice system really works. I think these shows created a mindset in which the prosecutor and especially the forensic experts were the good guy and helped create the scenarios in the cadaver king and the country dentist in Mississippi, in which Michael West was able to lie again and again on the stand about fabricated forensic evidence. I mean, if you look back now, and this is, you have to think about this with society, because we as society are taught a certain way, and is taught when it's younger. Because I started watching a lot of these shows. I was born in the 70s, 72 to be exact. But I like to say I'm 21, so anybody that's, you know, trying to guess my age is 21. But, you know, the thing about it is that I started watching these shows when I was a little boy with my grandmother. I used to love sitting down with my grandmother and watching these shows. But, you know, it's always a show where they got the right person. Every time they got the right Hawaii 5-0, Magnum, PI, Starchy, and
all this big stuff that builds up to it that makes it seem like it was the right one.
But you know something? Nobody, in one of the favorite shows that I love was Matlock. Matlock always showed, even when the police got someone, you know, it wasn't the right person. Or it showed how they was arresting the wrong person. Or if they were arresting the right person, what would be fair and just? All the rest of them were about, hey, they got their man. You know, Hawaii Fire had a thing. They always get they always get a man. So, and that's what police is get it from. They always get a man. And so now society think the police always get a man. So now we are conditioned mind like that. But thank God that now things are being done, such as educating people and potential jurors of how deep this system has been actually been bent out of shape, you know. And as you said before, the prosecutors don't really know what happened at the scene of the crime. The police officers don't really know what happened at the scene of the crime. They do their reports, they do their method, their policies, and they follow procedure to try to prosecute a crime, which in a lot of cases have you're unable.
Decide what happened.
You're really unable to do. You know,
well,
if a police officer
they're deciding what happened.
What they're allowed to do, they're allowing a police officer. And as you know, I talked with certain state attorneys lately, and we was talking about some of the issues. And one of the issues is how the police write their police reports. You know, a police can write a police report and take away your life with a pen and paper.
That's very true. I had a patrol sergeant reports according to jurisdictions.
You broke up
Did
a
you
little
hear
bit.
that?
No, I didn't hear you.
I said, that's very true. I had a patrol sergeant that taught us to write our report and write the narrative, to write it with the jury instructions as a guide. That way you include all the elements, you've dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, and that's a concrete report that can ensure a conviction.
But what happens when a police officer does that? You know, being a police officer, they work a lot of times. They work a lot of shifts. A lot of times they be real tired. So what happens when they just fill in things that they believe or they think that happen because you know they're tired, so they just put it in there, and then the prosecutor pick up the case, you know, and they don't hold the officer accountable for making the report. They just feel like the report is accurate.
Well, here's what's going on, and this is what a lot of people don't understand. What happens in the investigative phase is completely different than what you may see happen in the trial phase. Because as a deputy sheriff, when I wrote my report, I'm supposed to have all the statements there, all the evidence there to be included in the report. So I'm not planning guessing, making anything up, or I'm not deciding what must have been, what could have been, or what should be, or what has been. I'm writing according to what I have in front of me. If I've got two people saying two different things, that's what you're going to read in my report. But now when it gets to the prosecutor's office and they have to take it into the courtroom trial, you're going to see something completely different that may not reflect what's in my report. All my report did was report the fact information that I discovered. What they do with it in that courtroom is where you see so many different directions taken out of that, or it being changed or turned, or, you know, somehow massaged into something else. What they're doing is they're painting all these details into the picture they want you, the jury, to see. And a lot of times, what you don't know, you're getting a picture, much less the whole picture, and certainly not a true picture.
And you know, a question was asked by the same person. Do either of you think you are making headway at educating members of the public who will serve on juries? I think we are. I started speaking with Witness Innocent and FADP, who's I'm now on the board with. And welcome to the board of FADP, Ron. I heard you also joined us on the board for FADP. So congratulations on that. But since 2009, I think like 2 months after I was out, I was actually asked to do speaking. At first, I didn't want to be bothered with anyone, but I started doing it, and you know, it really don't pay so like that. So, but then I developed a passion for it, and I just can't stop talking about it. And one of the reasons I can't stop talking about it And you have to understand, when we sit here and talk about this subject, and it's like we have to relive this every time we turn tell our story. We have to relive it again and again and again. And you know, sometimes it takes a mental toll on it. But what helps me is that I do it with a passion. When I started speaking in 2009, you know, they usually always do surveys of who's in favor for the death penalty and who's not. Since then, before it used to be like 65%, 70% was for the death penalty. You know, agreed with the death penalty. Now things have changed where majority is saying no, they can't agree with the death penalty. So I think that by us speaking and telling our stories, you know, it is helping shape the potential jurors' mind to make them look at things more serious than what they actually really do. As for instance, a normal person can go and talk to someone about the death penalty. Okay, they will listen and they might find some things interesting, but they will get bored quickly. But if you take a person that's such as myself or Wright or other exonerees, and you place them in front of that person, you're gonna have that first person full attention, and they're gonna listen. It's like, you know, you could tell a friend they shouldn't be doing this, but then they go to their counselor. They don't want to listen to you, but then they go to their counselor, and the counselor tell them the same thing, and then they're like, well, my counselor told me this, and I shouldn't be doing that. But it's the same thing you just told them. And that's, so I think that through the programs we have working through social media now, and we get a lot of more viewers. You know, I Stand and Witness the Innocence are really pushing out. FADP has joined in with us, you know, and I think that we are definitely making a lot of headway. I would say from with 10 years, from 10 years ago, I say we made like a 99% difference now. And we're actually getting less people voting for death now also. And we have less state attorneys actually going for death. And one of those reasons is because for Witness the Innocent, we have a program called Accuracy and Justice, where 3 death row exonerees and facilitator, which usually be attorney, go and have a forum inside the state attorney's office. And we talk with the state attorneys, and inside we have crime units, we have lab units, we have state attorneys, we have police officers, we have detectives, all come in, listen to our stories, and we exchange questions and answers and things like that. And I learned that the state attorneys, even though we're blasting the state attorneys, a lot of state attorneys are really not bad people. You know, it's just the way how some want to do their job and some don't. You know, now our state attorneys are really participating, especially we don't have a lot of accuracy and justice committees, and we hope they have some more. But they are trying, a lot of state attorneys are trying to work to make their division and their area better with interior units that review cases, like Andrew Warren. And, you know, I'm throwing his name out of Andrew Warren because I am so proud of him, because, you know, I know he's probably not even watching my show, but I just wanted to say how proud I am of him. And Miss Alana, she is my icon. You know, and she gave me strength to fight, because it's like, here it is, she take this job and she decided to stand up and say she's not taking this death penalty. She's not prosecuting death penalty cases like that. And you know, she got so much scrutiny, but you know, I stand up and I feel proud to be fighting, because I don't think she should have to go through what she went through to stand up for us on death row. Even though I'm not on death row, I fight for those that's on death row, and I feel like a death row will always be a part of me. So I thank God for state attorneys like such as them two there that stepped up there in Florida, and in that jurisdictions. You also see that the crime rate, death penalty is not a deterrent to slow the crime rate down, because it doesn't, as most people use it as. So we're about to round it up, Ryan. So is there anything else you would like to say?
Yeah, I am truly grateful for what Andrew Warren has done and for what Aramis Ayala did in creating their conviction integrity and conviction review units. However, that is after the fact. What I would like to see implemented is integrity in prosecution. Let's stop things to convince people to believe what they're saying is the case, and let the evidence speak for itself. Let's give the people the facts and the truth. I'm all for punishing those that commit crimes. The problem with the death penalty is that it ends the penalty. And that's just another huge problem with it, along with the fact that it does that with innocent people that are not guilty of the crimes they've been accused of. What I think a lot of proponents of the death penalty don't realize is that once an execution takes place, there is no more pain, no more misery, no more suffering, no more punishing, no more regret, none of that for the individual who's been executed. But to have to wake up day after day in that prison, living that prison life that I wish on no one, that's the penalty that, for those who want these people punished, should be seeing, rather than the death penalty. Because while that person has been executed and they're free now, it is the rest of us who must go on with all these things we have to live with and the losses we had to suffer that they no longer have to. So those are the two major reasons I oppose the death penalty, and why I think we should continue the fight to abolish the death penalty and pay close attention to our elected state attorneys that make the decision whether or not to seek the death penalty. Because the worst case is, and I heard it come up in the jury selection at my trial, is to have someone convicted, sentenced to death, and then once that sentence is meted out, everybody just knows justice was served, only to come back and find out that person had been innocent all along, and we executed an innocent person that we can no longer, do anything for. Like Freddie Pitt said, we can free a man from a jail cell, but you can never free anyone from a grave. And I think that's an opportunity we have no business taking upon ourselves and, putting people in that position. Because like Mark Elliott said, if something like this can happen to somebody with me or like me, then it can happen to anybody. I was not a problem child. I was never a criminal. I never was arrested, never been in any trouble at all. In fact, I was the police. So if something like this can happen to me, then you'd better believe it can happen to anyone, and you won't see it coming either.
This is, I really liked this show. We got a lot of information out and things, and our fight with this criminal justice reform and abolishing the death penalty are such a heavy burden, but so joyful at times. But I would like to say, as usual, I'm always going to say this on every show, doing these shows and things is not free. So, if anyone can donate any other thing, or, go to witnessinnocent.org and donate so we can continue having our shows, bringing on guests and filling people up with great information. I'd like to thank our chairman on the board, Kwame, and executive director, Kurt Bloodworth, who is also Death Row Exonerated, for allowing us to have this show. I want to thank Allison, Jenny, Kara, Tricia, Mary Kate, and the new one, Cody, for a great job helping put these shows together and making things happen. You know, doing great research. They're really working. Even though they're working from home, it seems like they're working on a plan. Like there's machines, they just constantly working and making sure things right. So I want to thank the staff at Witness the Innocent. I also want to thank Mark Elliott at FADP, Hannah at FIU, and Gorman at FIU, Death Penalty Clinic, our donors at the UN for making this happen, and our partners at the Innocent Project. You know, when you hear the name Witness the Innocent, we're tied in to a lot of different organizations. And a special shout out to Represent Justice, who helped us out a whole lot and put us on this path. And I want to thank everybody for joining in. And hopefully next week, Thursday at 3 o'clock, you can have some friends, invite friends to join in. I don't know what the show gonna be about right now, but I think it's gonna be a big surprise if it could be. So we're throwing up some ideas, so you know, be prepared for it. But it's very important. One other thing, it's very important that even if you can't donate or you can, you know, you can support us by taking this video and sharing on your Facebook page and asking some of those that's your friend to share. Because the more people we reach, the better it is, because everybody that is somebody that may view this may be a jury, may be on the jury right now dealing with a death penalty case. And maybe, or not even a death penalty case, but determine a person's life and punishment. And they need to know this information. They need to understand the system. And I want to thank everybody again for joining us at Cruel Justice Weekly Conversation, powered by Witness the Innocent, hosted by Herman Lindsey. And I hope to see everybody next week at 3 o'clock, every Thursday at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much.